If they're not reading on a third grade level, by the time they finish the third grade, they start planning prison cells 15 years out. Out of the 10 children that don't read on third grade level, approximately 6 of them plus will end up in prison. So Donna and Sarah and Jackie and others, Shelby County, all grades are primary, but that's significant. Up until the third grade, we're learning to read. When we finish the third grade, we read to learn.
Mid-South Viewpoint, a Christian news and information feature of Bott Radio Network 640 AM, discussing the news, views, issues, and concerns that affect our community. Join us now for today's edition of Mid-South Viewpoint.
Today, millions of American children are growing up in family situations that put them at high risk for long-term poverty, delinquency, teen pregnancy, and addiction. These families are in our churches and in our communities. They're our neighbors, and we're commanded to love our neighbors as ourselves. Hi, and welcome to Mid-South Viewpoint. We're going to talk about loving our children, loving our neighbors in our community, our children in our community today, with our guest, Dr. Rick Wood, who is the regional manager for Shepherding the Next Generation, overseeing Tennessee, Mississippi, and Arkansas, Rick.
Correct.
So you've got some traveling to do, I believe.
Yeah, and we just added Kentucky to that.
Oh, let me add Kentucky on here. Time to update the website.
Exactly.
Now, you have been in ministry since 1977.
Yes, sir.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Jacksonville, Arkansas. My dad's a minister, been a minister all of my life. Still alive and doing well, and probably preached yesterday, as a matter of fact, in Jacksonville. So I spent my formative years there in Jacksonville, and before that, we lived all over as ministers are inclined to do.
You said in your bio that you actually served as a youth minister. Did you serve as a youth minister with your dad?
No. I was out in Sudan, Texas, as a youth minister.
But you had some experiences doing that.
Yes. Yeah. Matter of fact, I tell everybody that shepherding is as much fun and ministry as I've had since I was in youth ministry in the 70s.
Now, you've served in different capacities, too, not just youth ministry. You've also been lead pastor?
Yes. Yes, been lead pastor. Worked as a singles minister here in town for years at Highland Street Church when it was over by the University of Memphis.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not realize that.
Yeah.
Also, you do consulting work, or have done some consulting work since the 1990s, helping churches, especially when they're trying to raise money for building programs, campaigns, and things like that.
Right. That's correct. Yeah, I don't do as much of that anymore since 2008. That has been obviously down. I have done a campaign or two since then, but not like I used to.
One of the things that interests me, too, was you're training leaders in other countries. You've worked on several islands in the Caribbean.
Correct.
Also, you've worked in Nicaragua, which I've told you before has a special place in my heart.
Absolutely.
And the Ukraine, and also in France.
Yes. I was blessed to go to Marseille for a week. I actually had been going to Ukraine, and they stopped my visa for a 6-month period. So I had an airplane ticket I had to use. And so a friend of mine said, well, why don't you go to Marseille and work with the church there? And it was a wonderful experience.
Wow.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Well, tell me some of the experience. What did you do?
Well, they were in the process of training ministers locally there in Marseille and in other parts of France. And so I got to work with that group all week long. Basically, I did the DISC profile. I don't know if you're familiar with the DISC profile. It's a personality profile. And then I did a spiritual gift inventory with them because it's important for folks to understand their personality and others' personality and then their spiritual giftedness that God has given them to work in ministry. So that was the effort that I worked on there.
And we ought to come back and do a radio show sometime just on that.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Because it's so important. Dealing with individuals, well, we deal with people every day, and if we don't understand our personality and their personality, it really makes it difficult and challenging to serve with one another.
Well, Rick, we're primarily here today to talk about something coming up on May the 3rd. It's a proclamation that Memphis Mayor A.C. Wharton has made called Celebration of Teachers Sunday.
Correct.
And you guys are involved with it.
Yes. This is I think our 4th year here in Memphis to do that. We also do it in our Pittsburgh area group. Basically, Celebration of Sunday is a time for churches to celebrate with teachers and the giftedness of teaching. We think it's vital that the right teacher be in the right place for children. You know, they can change the whole trajectory of a child's life as you think about day in and day out impetus in the life of that child. I know for me, it was a lady by the name of Miss Brandon. She was my 9th grade English teacher. And English had never been one of those great subjects for me. I mean, after all, I almost said I did grow up in Arkansas. I'm not trying to offend anybody from Arkansas, just trying to make a joke. But Miss Brandon, at the end of the 9th grade year, called me aside. And Miss Brandon was one of those women who was very forceful, small in stature. She was barely 5 foot tall. But she carried a great deal of weight on campus just because she demanded respect. And Miss Brandon pulled me aside one day and she said, "Rick, I need to talk to you." And I thought, oh my goodness, here comes the lecture or whatever. And she said, "Rick Wood, you're not stupid. You're just lazy." And she said, "You have the ability to be in the advanced English class." And I thought, oh my goodness, not sure about that, but okay. And Miss Brandon basically said, "I'm going to put you in the advanced English class in the 10th grade. Well, I walked in the class and here are all the brainiacs. I felt really uncomfortable because I'd rather play football and flirt with the girls than I had study English. But, Miss Brandon, believing in me, sent me on a journey, and I finally was able to finish my doctoral work at Southern Seminary in Louisville. I thanked Miss Brandon because she was the one that basically put my life on a different platform, on a different journey.
That relationship, Rick, as you well just described here, is so powerful between student and teacher and what teachers can do if you have the right teacher in the classroom. I was just thinking, because we're looking at children at risk, and I know that's largely what drives the whole ministry of shepherding the next generation.
Correct.
Children at risk. And we want to talk about the implications there, but I would fit in that category, growing up in a single-parent home myself. But looking back over elementary school, I can still remember my teachers. I remember Mrs. Morgan in 1st grade, Mrs. Wise in 2nd grade, Mrs. Good in 3rd grade, Mrs. Kane in 4th grade, Mrs. Jones in 5th grade, and Mrs. McNair in 6th grade.
Yes.
I mean, they all had a special place as a young boy who was seeing his parents go through this horrible divorce and needing some leadership. And each of those teachers, and in many cases, you don't always see that, but in my case, I remember each of these personalities that impacted my life.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. For the good or for the bad.
Exactly. For the good or for the bad.
And having that right teacher in the right place, like you say, can change the life of a child.
Well, let's talk about children at risk. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, children not living with both parents made up the largest percentage of at-risk children. Now, there's no substitute for the security and emotional support that a two-parent household can provide for a child. You and I know that.
Right.
But when that's not the reality for a child, and in most cases today that's increasingly not the reality, how does an organization like Shepherding the Next Generation fill in that gap?
Well, we actually don't fill the gap ourselves, but we come in with nonprofits. Our Rise Memphis locally, Donna Gaines and her crew, Sarah Jerkins, are training church people to go in and mentor, especially 2nd graders. So what we do is try to make churches aware of the fact that there is an organization out there that's very good at training adults to work with children. And so we want that organization to be known. A Memphis Teacher Residency, another organization here in Memphis. Basically, David Montague and his crew brings in the brightest and best college graduates and then trains them to work in urban settings. So you have Arise Memphis coming in and working with children at risk. You have Memphis Teacher Residency providing that good teacher, that great teacher, at a moment in time when that child needs that teacher. And so you have the church coming alongside the organization, the school, to help those children at risk. And then David and his crew also believe in community, and so they would move into that community. For example, I know of one of the schools they work with that the coaches also participate in an after-school program at the middle school. And there's a church building between the two campuses, and they're there generally every afternoon doing that. And so we're just trying to connect.
You're like a catalyst for doing this.
That's correct.
And you brought up a key point, a church that's next to the school. In so many cases in our community, that's the case. There's churches right next door to school campuses.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Don Gilbert, Don used to work for Central Church here in town, moved from Germantown, Collierville area into Orange Mound with the intent of helping local pastors, not coming in as the white guy on the white horse, but there as a servant to those communities. There were already a number of things going on in that community, but he's walking alongside those local pastors and making them aware of Arise Memphis and how they can get their church involved in that community again.
Well, Rick, as I mentioned to you, I was first introduced to Shepherding the Next Generation by Pastor Brendan Walker. Great guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
But my understanding when I first heard about this, it was more of a local organization, but I soon discovered after my research that you are a national organization.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. We operate under an organization called Council for a Strong America. We have the police and the sheriffs involved in one category. We have retired admirals and generals in another category. All these folks are involved in lives of children at risk. We also have business people trying to fill the gap. And then we have this organization, which is the Christian side of the organization, that basically gets churches and church leaders involved in a number of different things. One would be public policy. When we find a good public policy, you know, the government's doing some good things out there, and we as Christians need to come in and say, you're doing well, how can we help? And so when there's a public policy issue that comes up, we want our church leaders to know about it and come in as the unexpected messenger in that case. And they bring more weight to the table than others because they've got nothing to gain except a better community.
Exactly.
And so it's important for us to be involved in that. And then shepherding, we're across the United States heavily involved in Pittsburgh, here in Memphis, Ohio, Michigan, up in the Northeast, some Florida, and also in California.
Well, in helping our community to become a better community, the church has a vital role here, as you mentioned, and the opportunity to participate in events like Celebration of Teachers Sunday, May the 3rd. Now, what are you asking churches to do on this day?
We're asking them to come together as a body and celebrate teaching and teachers. And so they can do a variety of different things. A lot of our churches will pray over teachers that Sunday. Some of them roll out the red carpet for teachers on that Sunday. Basically, we just want teachers to know that Christians and that churches are supporting them. And they need to go online and register. We have a website here called shepherdingmemphis.org. If they'll go online, register. We will also provide a gift for teachers on that Sunday. So if they're celebrating 10 teachers, we'll provide the teachers with a small gift of appreciation. But they need to go online and register at shepherdingmemphis.org to make sure that they get to participate in that.
You know, Rick, I'm hearing stories. More and more churches are adopting these schools. They are trying to encourage teachers. I've heard of one church going and, buying gift cards for teachers, maybe to have a nice meal out somewhere, or just little ways, maybe bring in some food to the teacher's lounge, or things that they could do to say, hey, we love you. We want to help support you. Maybe even in the classroom.
Absolutely.
There's ways that you can practically make a difference in these students' lives and encourage the teachers along the way.
Yeah. Give you a couple of examples. I attend Sycamore View Church. Every year, we've been working with 3 different schools, and we invite the teachers to come into worship. Ours will be May the 3rd. We'll invite the teachers in. We're going to give them a gift. Last year, we gave them, I think, wasn't much, a $5 Starbucks card, but it'll buy 1 or 2 Starbucks. Then we're going to have a lunch celebrating those teachers and honoring them. Orchard Fellowship here in town, Sam Shaw and Kim Cassell, basically they have adopted Ross Elementary, and they went in, and here's a key question we need to start thinking about as we go into schools is not we're here to take over, but how can we help? What do you need?
Yeah.
And the first thing they found was that the principal said, my flower beds look awful. So Sam and Kim and the church at Orchard came in and redid all the flower beds at Ross Elementary. And then they said, what else do you need? They said, well, the teacher's lounge is in awful shape. So they gutted the teacher's lounge and refurbished it. And so there's a number of things that you can do. And just now, when they go to school, the teachers have a great deal of respect for that church because they came in and said, what do you need? How can we be the servant to you?
When a church is looking to implement strategy, what are some things that they should consider? Well, obviously, you want to come in as a servant. That should be key, I'm sure. But what are some other things you should look at?
They need to get acquainted with the principal and with the counselor and ask, again, what can we do? How do we help you? And so as they go into and get acquainted with the principal and the counselor, they also will have to, anybody that goes into the school will have to go through a background check, but the city of Memphis is making that easy and accessible. They need to be acquainted with Arise Memphis and Germantown United Methodist Church in their training program. They need just to be aware that there are people out there who are doing it well, and then find those people and ask, help us.
Yeah. You said training programs, so there's actually some specifics they can go through.
Yes. Here in Memphis, the Shelby County Schools uses what is called Team Read. Jackie Flom at Germantown, Sarah Jerkins at Bellevue, they are training folks on how to use sight words, the, that, ran, and so that children in the second grade can learn sight words so that they can be ready to go into the third grade. Now, that's primary. I didn't know about this until I started working for shepherding. The third grade is a key grade for any child. If they're not reading on a third grade level, by the time they finish the third grade, they start planning prison cells 15 years out. Out of the 10 children that don't read on third grade level, approximately 6 of them plus will end up in prison. So Donna and Sarah and Jackie and others, Shelby County, all grades are primary, but that's significant. Up until the third grade, we're learning to read. When we finish the third grade, we read to learn. And the child that can't read will not be able to fill out a job application. There'll be multiplicity of things that goes wrong for that child if we're not involved.
And Rick, also the implications to our community in the future. What an opportunity, again, that our churches can make a difference by engaging and being involved here.
Absolutely. Tony Evans, I don't remember the name of the book, it's basically Returning America to God. In that, he cites that there are billions of dollars that would be saved every year if children are taught to read and taught how do you get out of a gang once you get in it, how do you move in the right directions. And they've done a marvelous job in changing their whole community. And 20 years out, the savings will be astronomical.
My. Now, Rick, in your particular oversight of the 3-state area, Tennessee, Arkansas, Mississippi, Kentucky now, we've got Kentucky in there, what are some of the biggest challenges that you see?
Well, I see a lot of, for example, in Arkansas, a lot of the children, and we're talking majority, children, when they finish the 5th grade, are not reading on the 5th grade level. Same thing is true here. Same thing is true in Mississippi. Same thing is true in eastern Tennessee as well. And so the challenge is, how do we make churches aware of the need, number one, then number two, that there is a strategy for assisting children in getting out of the poverty level that they find themselves in. There is hope. I don't know if you've seen the new movie, McFarlane, is it? About a city, a guy went into a city, a small Spanish city, and gave hope through running. Here's an educator that saw opportunity for children to get out of the situation they were in. We need to get out of our silos as churches and start working collectively as churches. It's not territorial. The kingdom's bigger than any one church, and we forget that sometimes. And so just making folks aware that there are opportunities. And I'm seeing revival coming to all of these areas because churches are beginning to say, what can we do? We don't have all the answers, but with God's help, we'll find the answers to what's going on.
Shepherding the Next Generation has several motivating factors. Of course, the commission, you believe, of Scripture that teaches you to do what you do, but also motivating factor of love. And what does love for these at-risk families look like?
Well, it can look like a number of, I'll give you one example. Mid-South Food Bank here in town. 1 in 5 or 1 in 4 children goes hungry every weekend. So there's a backpack ministry with Mid-South Food Bank. Costs $7 to feed a child for the weekend. Now, we're not talking steak and potatoes, but we're talking staples where a child can survive for the weekend. Because if they're on assisted lunches, free lunches or assisted lunches, their last meal will happen at noon on Friday, and they won't have another one, a good one, until Monday. And so churches can get involved in a backpack ministry, and there are several churches in town doing that. And for as little as $7, they can feed a child for the weekend.
This is crazy because you hear of these feeding programs in other countries, and we need to still do that. Don't get me wrong.
Exactly.
But this is happening here in our own community, right here in Memphis, Tennessee.
Yeah, the Mid-South. You know, it's not any better no matter where you go. So get involved in a food bank. Figure out a way to provide food for a child on a weekend. You can do after-school programs. I know that Second Presbyterian here in town adopted Berkeley Elementary, found out that Berkeley was about 60% Hispanic, so that means you've got two languages going on, and most of the adults don't know the second language, and so they started English as the second language. And so that's nothing but the gospel being portrayed, that love being played out in a child and an adult's life.
Talking about the causes for at-risk children, we talked about the home life, for example. Maybe the home might not have but one parent in the home. Also, there's economic reasons, too. And what are some other things that are causing for these children to be at risk?
Well, obviously, Satan's working well. He and his crew are working well. When the disintegration of the family starts to happen and the church is not there to pick up the pieces and start helping people put their lives back together, then this kind of thing starts happening, and it becomes an epidemic proportion when that thing happens. And so to me, it's the disintegration of the American family and Christ not being in the center of that's causing all of this.
Of course, we see teen moms, there's parenting skills and things that are taught through the work too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the things that we encouraged, there is a program that the government's doing. It comes right out of Titus, where Paul told Titus to teach the older women, to teach the younger women to be good wives, to be good mothers. And the government was actually doing a program like that, where a teen would become pregnant and there would be an adult walk into that child's life, and then they would work with them until the child was, pre-birth, and then after birth until the child was about 2 or 3 years old, and just giving parenting skills. Well, there's also Agape Child and Family Services. Tawana Whitlock made me aware of a group called One by One. Not the government version, but it's the biblical version of helping churches enter into an at-risk child's life. And so, again, it's awareness. We need to be unafraid to take the gospel into somebody's life, and you do that. Light shines the best when there's darkness. And so we need to be people who are aware of the fact that we are people of light, and the only way that others get that light is when God, through us, walks into their life.
In a study examining father involvement with 134 children of adolescent mothers over the first 10 years of life, researchers found that father-child contact was associated with better socio-emotional and academic functioning. The results indicated that children that with more involved fathers experienced fewer behavioral problems and also scored higher on reading achievement. The study showed the significance of the role of fathers in the lives of at-risk children, even in the case of non-resident fathers, if the father would at least be involved in a child's life.
Exactly. And, a good example of that model is Faith Baptist, north on Germantown, Bartlett area. Danny Sinkfield's the pastor, and Danny and his men invite, I've forgotten the name of the football team they invite in every year, but they invite the guys in, and they have a weekend where they are surrogate dads. They teach things like, how do you shave? Well, if you're in a single-parent home and the male is not there, where do you find out how to shave?
Yeah.
How do you find out how to do those things? And having a man to talk to, a man having another man to talk to is significant.
It makes a difference.
Absolutely.
I remember a Sunday school teacher taught me how to tie a tie.
Exactly.
Seriously.
Exactly.
Are there obstacles to overcome trying to bridge the gap between the faith community and educators in Memphis? Because you're mixing the faith community with education. What are some of the obstacles you possibly have to overcome?
Well, fortunately, in Memphis, we do not have that obstacle to overcome because of Arise Memphis, because of Faith Baptist, because of Christ United, Germantown United Methodist Church. All these folks have gone in, and basically Orchard have gone in and said, how can we help? And so the door was open. When situations are desperate, which is what we find ourselves, there are 32 failing schools, 32 failing schools in Memphis. Out of the 69 failing schools across the whole state, 32 are right here. Fortunately, we have a superintendent who understands that the faith community needs to be involved in the lives of children. And there was a big article. We did a press conference a couple of weeks ago. Article came out in the Commercial Appeal about Superintendent Hobson saying we need the faith community involved. Now, while there are other areas that might be a problem, I'm finding in the Mid-South it is more of a mental problem than it is anything else, because if churches go in and say, what can we do? How can we help? Generally, they're welcomed with open arms.
I know of one church, I'm not going to mention their name, they went to a local high school and said, hey, we want to be here for you. We don't want our plaque on the wall. We don't want to be mentioned anywhere. We don't even want people to know we're doing this. We just want to help. And they have built this unbelievable relationship with this school because of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the key. Jesus was the most humble. Moses in his lifetime was the most humble person that ever lived. But when you walk in with a servant attitude, with a towel in your hand, how do people refuse that?
Rick, how can we contact Shepherding the Next Generation here locally?
Locally, it's www.shepherdingmemphis.org. And that's important. If they want to participate in this May 3rd event, which I would hope everybody would want to, again, just go register and let us know how many teachers are going to be involved, and we'll get gifts to that church for those teachers.
And also ongoing involvement with you guys. Churches can do that.
Absolutely. Well, that's why that website was created, and we hired Kingdom Quality to help us, assist us here in Memphis with better websites. Number one, our national organization has a website, but to get involved here, it's just as simple as going on shepherdingmemphis.org.
shepherdingmemphis.org.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow, this has been fantastic. Dr. Rick Wood, thank you for what you're doing for Christ's kingdom, helping shepherd the next generation.
Amen. Thank you.
I appreciate your time.
I appreciate the
Hey, we're going to have to
opportunity.
get back together. So much we could talk about.
Yes.
I want to do that.
Let's do it.
Open invitation.
Okay. Thank you.
Friends, thanks for listening to this edition of Mid-South Viewpoint. Don't forget about the celebration of Teachers Sunday on May 3rd. Go to that website, shepherdingmemphis.org, to get more details. We hope you'll participate not only on this one-day event, but throughout the year. Find how you can impact the lives of these children, help make a difference for Christ's kingdom. Thanks so much for stopping by. I'm Byron Tyler. We'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Mid-South Viewpoint. If you'd like to join the conversation, you can email us. Our address is wcrv@botradionetwork.com. This has been Mid-South Viewpoint, another Christian news and information feature from Bot Radio Network 640 AM.